Question 1. During the evaluation of an applicant's personal statement for the Allende University Center entrance exam, which approach best demonstrates the applicant's understanding of the university's mission and their potential to contribute to its community? Option A. Presenting a comprehensive list of academic awards and extracurricular achievements, emphasizing their personal drive and ambition to succeed in a challenging academic environment. Option B. Expressing a general desire to gain knowledge and develop skills, highlighting their adaptability and willingness to embrace new challenges in any university setting. Option C. Focusing on the prestige of Allende University Center and how attending will enhance their future career prospects, without detailing specific program connections or community involvement. Option D. Articulating how their academic interests and personal experiences directly align with Allende University Center's specific programs, research opportunities, and stated commitment to interdisciplinary learning, while providing concrete examples of how they envision contributing to campus life and academic discourse. The correct answer is D. Articulating how their academic interests and personal experiences directly align with Allende University Center's specific programs, research opportunities, and stated commitment to interdisciplinary learning, while providing concrete examples of how they envision contributing to campus life and academic discourse. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the applicant to demonstrate an understanding of how their proposed academic program aligns with the stated mission and values of Allende University Center, and how their personal attributes contribute to the university's community. The challenge lies in articulating this alignment persuasively and authentically, without resorting to superficial claims or misrepresenting their capabilities. Careful judgment is required to balance self-promotion with genuine reflection and a clear understanding of the university's ethos. Correct approach involves a thorough and honest self-assessment of how one's academic goals, personal experiences, and future aspirations directly contribute to and benefit from Allende University Center's specific educational philosophy and community engagement initiatives. This approach is right because it demonstrates a deep understanding of the university's unique offerings and a genuine desire to be a contributing member of its academic and social fabric. It reflects a commitment to aligning personal development with institutional goals, a key indicator of a successful and engaged student. This aligns with the implicit regulatory framework of university admissions, which seeks candidates who are not only academically capable, but also a good fit for the institution's culture and mission. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on listing academic achievements without connecting them to the university's specific programs or values fails to demonstrate genuine interest or understanding of Allende. This is an ethical failure, as it misrepresents the applicant's engagement with the university's specific context. Another incorrect approach that exaggerates personal qualities or potential contributions without concrete examples or a clear link to the university's needs is also problematic. This can be seen as a misrepresentation of facts, undermining the integrity of the application process. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes generic statements about wanting to learn and grow, without specifying how Allende University Center is uniquely positioned to facilitate this growth, neglects the core requirement of demonstrating a tailored fit, thus failing to meet the implicit expectation of a well-researched and considered application. Professionals in admissions and academic advising should use a decision-making framework that prioritizes authenticity, relevance, and a clear demonstration of alignment between the applicant's profile and the institution's mission and values. This involves looking for evidence of thoughtful consideration, genuine interest, and a realistic understanding of how the applicant will contribute to and benefit from the specific academic environment. Question 2. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a data breach affecting applicant personal information submitted for the Allende University Center entrance exam. Which of the following approaches best addresses this risk in accordance with the principles of responsible data stewardship and exam integrity? Option A. Rely on existing general IT security policies to manage the risk, as they are assumed to cover all potential scenarios. Option B. Conduct a thorough impact assessment to identify potential consequences for applicants and the university, and develop targeted mitigation strategies based on the findings. Option C. Prioritize the speed of the admissions process over a detailed evaluation of the data breach risk. Option D. Immediately implement the most advanced technical security measures available, assuming this will fully address the risk. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough impact assessment to identify potential consequences for applicants and the university, and develop targeted mitigation strategies based on the findings. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect sensitive data. University entrance exam context implies a need for fairness and integrity in the admissions process, while also acknowledging the privacy rights of applicants. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any impact assessment is conducted in a manner that is both effective and compliant with the established regulatory framework for Allende University Center. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented assessment of the potential consequences of a data breach, considering both the likelihood and impact of various scenarios. This approach aligns with best practices in data protection and risk management, which are implicitly required by the need to maintain the integrity and trustworthiness of the university's admissions process. Specifically, it necessitates identifying potential threats, vulnerabilities, and the potential harm to individuals and the institution. This proactive and structured method ensures that appropriate mitigation strategies can be developed and implemented, thereby safeguarding applicant data and upholding the university's reputation. An approach that focuses solely on the technical aspects of data security without considering the broader implications for applicants or the university's operational continuity is insufficient. This failure to conduct a comprehensive impact assessment overlooks the potential for reputational damage, legal repercussions, and the erosion of trust among prospective students. Similarly, an approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness risks overlooking critical vulnerabilities or underestimating the potential impact of a breach, leading to inadequate protective measures. Finally, an approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or assumptions rather than a structured assessment fails to provide a reliable basis for risk mitigation and may not satisfy any implicit regulatory or ethical requirements for due diligence in data handling. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific regulatory and ethical landscape governing data handling at Allende University Center. This involves identifying all relevant policies, guidelines, and any applicable external regulations. The next step is to clearly define the scope of the risk assessment, including the types of data involved and the systems that process it. A systematic process of identifying threats and vulnerabilities should then be undertaken, followed by an evaluation of the potential impact of these risks. Based on this assessment, appropriate controls and mitigation strategies should be developed and implemented, with a plan for ongoing monitoring and review. Question 3. Performance analysis shows that the proposed revisions to the Allende University Center entrance exam may streamline the administrative process and potentially reduce testing time for candidates. However, there is concern that these changes could disproportionately affect applicants from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds or those with different learning styles. Which of the following approaches best addresses the ethical and regulatory considerations of implementing these revisions? Option A. Proceed with the revisions immediately to capitalize on the anticipated efficiency gains, assuming that any potential negative impacts will be minor and manageable after implementation. Option B. Prioritize the opinions of current faculty and admissions staff regarding the perceived benefits of the revisions, as they have the most direct experience with the entrance exam. Option C. Implement the revisions and then gather feedback from a small, self-selected group of recent test takers to gauge their reactions and make minor adjustments based on their comments. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to evaluate the potential effects of the proposed revisions on all applicant groups, with a specific focus on fairness, equity, and validity, and develop mitigation strategies if adverse impacts are identified. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to evaluate the potential effects of the proposed revisions on all applicant groups, with a specific focus on fairness, equity, and validity, and develop mitigation strategies if adverse impacts are identified. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's strategic goals with the ethical obligations of ensuring academic integrity and fair assessment. The entrance exam is a critical gatekeeper, and any perceived bias or unfairness can have significant reputational and legal consequences for Allende University Center. Careful judgment is required to identify and mitigate potential biases in the assessment process. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that systematically evaluates how the proposed changes to the entrance exam might affect different groups of prospective students, particularly those from underrepresented backgrounds. This approach aligns with the principles of fairness, equity, and non-discrimination, which are fundamental to ethical assessment practices and are implicitly or explicitly supported by educational regulatory frameworks that aim to ensure equal opportunity. By proactively identifying potential adverse impacts, the university can implement mitigating strategies to ensure the exam remains a valid and equitable measure of aptitude. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the changes without a thorough impact assessment, assuming that the modifications are neutral or beneficial. This overlooks the potential for unintended consequences and disparate impacts on certain student demographics. Such an approach fails to uphold the ethical duty of care towards all applicants and could lead to accusations of discrimination, potentially violating university policies or broader educational guidelines that mandate fair and equitable admissions processes. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on the perceived efficiency gains of the proposed changes, disregarding the potential impact on assessment validity and fairness. It prioritizes administrative convenience over the core purpose of the entrance exam, which is to accurately and equitably identify suitable candidates. This narrow focus can lead to the selection of candidates who may not be the best fit for the university's programs, or conversely, the exclusion of deserving candidates, thereby undermining the university's educational mission and potentially violating principles of meritocracy and equal opportunity. A third incorrect approach is to rely on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a limited group of stakeholders when making decisions about the exam. While stakeholder input is valuable, it is not a substitute for rigorous, data-driven impact assessment. This approach risks introducing personal biases or overlooking systemic issues that affect broader student populations, failing to meet the professional standard of evidence-based decision-making in educational assessment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Define the objective, clearly articulate the goals of the proposed changes. 2. Identify stakeholders, recognize all groups affected by the changes. 3. Conduct a thorough impact assessment. Systematically analyze potential effects on different groups, considering both intended and unintended consequences. This should include an evaluation of fairness, validity, and equity. 4. Consult relevant regulations and ethical guidelines. Ensure compliance with all applicable laws, university policies, and professional ethical standards. 5. Develop mitigation strategies. If adverse impacts are identified, propose and implement measures to address them. 6. Monitor and evaluate. Continuously assess the effectiveness of the changes and make adjustments as needed. Question 4. The evaluation methodology shows a tendency to prioritize immediate student interest and perceived novelty over a thorough examination of the program's long-term academic viability, resource implications, and alignment with Allende University Center's established strategic objectives. Which of the following approaches to impact assessment best addresses this deficiency? Option A. An assessment focused primarily on gathering positive testimonials from current students and faculty regarding the perceived excitement and innovation of the proposed program. Option B. A balanced assessment that quantifies potential student enrollment and engagement metrics, alongside a detailed analysis of curriculum development costs, faculty expertise requirements, and projected graduate employability outcomes, all benchmarked against the university's strategic plan. Option C. An assessment that relies on informal discussions with industry professionals to gauge the general market demand for graduates without detailed analysis of the program's specific curriculum or resource needs. Option D. An assessment that emphasizes identifying areas where the new program can lead to immediate cost reductions in existing departmental budgets. The correct answer is B. A balanced assessment that quantifies potential student enrollment and engagement metrics, alongside a detailed analysis of curriculum development costs, faculty expertise requirements, and projected graduate employability outcomes, all benchmarked against the university's strategic plan. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge in assessing the impact of a proposed new academic program at Allende University Center. The core difficulty lies in balancing the potential benefits of innovation and student engagement with the need for rigorous, evidence-based decision-making that aligns with the university's strategic goals and resource allocation principles. A superficial or overly optimistic assessment could lead to misallocation of resources, unmet student expectations, and damage to the university's reputation. Conversely, an overly cautious approach might stifle valuable new initiatives. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that systematically considers multiple dimensions of the proposed program. This includes evaluating its alignment with the university's mission and strategic plan, assessing its potential academic and pedagogical value, projecting its financial viability and resource requirements, and considering its broader impact on student recruitment, retention, and graduate outcomes. This approach is justified by the principles of responsible academic governance and sound financial management, which are implicitly expected of any educational institution seeking to maintain its accreditation and public trust. Specifically, it aligns with the implied regulatory framework for university operations, which mandates due diligence in program development and resource deployment to ensure sustainability and educational quality. An approach that focuses solely on potential student enthusiasm without a thorough analysis of academic rigor and long-term viability is incorrect. This fails to meet the ethical obligation to provide a high-quality education and to manage university resources responsibly. It also overlooks potential regulatory requirements related to program approval and accreditation, which often demand evidence of academic soundness and institutional capacity. An approach that prioritizes immediate cost savings over the potential long-term benefits and strategic alignment of the program is also incorrect. While fiscal responsibility is crucial, short-sighted cost-cutting can undermine educational quality and future growth, potentially leading to greater costs down the line through decreased enrollment or reputational damage. This neglects the broader impact assessment required for sustainable institutional development. An approach that relies on anecdotal evidence and informal feedback without structured data collection and analysis is professionally unsound. This lacks the objectivity and rigor necessary for informed decision-making and can lead to biased conclusions. Regulatory frameworks for academic institutions typically require evidence-based justification for new programs, not mere impressions. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured, multi-stakeholder approach. This includes clearly defining the objectives of the impact assessment, identifying key performance indicators across academic, financial, and operational domains, gathering diverse data sources, both quantitative and qualitative, engaging relevant faculty and administrative departments, and critically evaluating findings against established university policies and strategic priorities. The final decision should be informed by a balanced consideration of all assessed impacts, with a clear rationale that can be communicated to all stakeholders. Question 5. The evaluation methodology shows that the admissions committee is tasked with assessing not only academic merit, but also a candidate's demonstrated impact on their community or chosen field. Considering the potential for subjectivity in defining and measuring impact, which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of fair and rigorous university admissions? Option A. Relying primarily on personal essays and letters of recommendation that emphasize a candidate's potential for future impact, without requiring specific evidence of past contributions. Option B. Giving preferential consideration to candidates who have participated in well-known extracurricular activities, regardless of their individual level of contribution or demonstrable impact within those activities. Option C. Focusing exclusively on academic achievements and standardized test scores, as these are the most objective and universally comparable measures of a candidate's ability. Option D. Prioritizing candidates who can provide detailed portfolios showcasing tangible projects, leadership roles with measurable outcomes, and documented instances of positive influence, alongside traditional academic credentials. The correct answer is D. Prioritizing candidates who can provide detailed portfolios showcasing tangible projects, leadership roles with measurable outcomes, and documented instances of positive influence, alongside traditional academic credentials. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a candidate to balance the university's stated commitment to academic integrity with the practical pressures of admissions. The admissions committee must ensure that the evaluation methodology is fair, transparent, and adheres to the principles of meritocracy, while also acknowledging that impact can be subjective and difficult to quantify consistently. The core challenge lies in defining and measuring impact in a way that is both meaningful for assessing potential and defensible against accusations of bias or arbitrary decision-making. The correct approach involves a structured and evidence-based assessment of a candidate's contributions and achievements, focusing on demonstrable outcomes and their alignment with the university's values. This approach is right because it prioritizes objective evidence over subjective impressions, thereby upholding the principles of fairness and transparency mandated by academic admissions regulations. By requiring specific examples and evidence of initiative, leadership, and positive influence, the university demonstrates a commitment to evaluating candidates on their actual contributions, rather than mere potential or anecdotal claims. This aligns with the ethical imperative to treat all applicants equitably and to base admissions decisions on merit. An approach that relies heavily on anecdotal evidence and personal testimonials without requiring concrete examples of impact fails to meet the standards of rigorous evaluation. This is ethically problematic as it opens the door to subjective bias and can disadvantage candidates who may have had significant impact but lack strong personal connections to provide glowing testimonials. It also fails to provide a consistent and defensible basis for admissions decisions, potentially violating internal university policies on fair assessment. Another incorrect approach is to solely focus on quantifiable metrics like grades or standardized test scores, ignoring the impact component entirely. While these metrics are important, they do not capture the full spectrum of a candidate's potential to contribute to the university community and beyond. Over-reliance on purely quantitative data can lead to overlooking candidates with exceptional leadership skills, community engagement, or innovative thinking, thereby failing to select a diverse and well-rounded cohort. This can be seen as a failure to fully implement the stated evaluation methodology, which explicitly includes impact assessment. Finally, an approach that prioritizes candidates with pre-existing connections or affiliations with the university, regardless of their demonstrated impact, is fundamentally unethical and likely violates admissions regulations. This practice undermines the principle of meritocracy and can lead to perceptions of favoritism and unfairness, damaging the university's reputation and the integrity of its admissions process. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Clearly defining the criteria for impact within the context of the university's mission and values. 2. Developing standardized tools and guidelines for assessing impact, ensuring consistency across all applicants. 3. Training admissions committee members on how to apply these criteria objectively and ethically. 4. Emphasizing the importance of evidence-based assessment and encouraging the collection of specific examples and data. 5. Establishing a review process to ensure fairness and to address any potential biases. Question 6. The evaluation methodology shows that the entrance examination for Allende University Center has a high correlation with first-year academic success for the general candidate pool. However, preliminary data suggests a statistically significant lower average score among candidates from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds compared to their more affluent peers, despite similar reported levels of prior academic achievement. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation in accordance with the principles of fair and equitable university admissions? Option A. Focus solely on increasing the number of preparatory courses offered to disadvantaged students to bridge the perceived academic gap without altering the examination itself. Option B. Conduct a thorough impact assessment to identify specific elements of the examination that may disproportionately affect candidates from disadvantaged backgrounds, and explore alternative assessment methods or accommodations to ensure equitable opportunity. Option C. Conclude that the observed differences in scores are a direct reflection of inherent differences in academic preparedness, and maintain the current examination as it accurately predicts success for the majority. Option D. Prioritize the efficiency of the admissions process by accepting the current examination results at face value, assuming any observed disparities are unavoidable consequences of a competitive selection. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough impact assessment to identify specific elements of the examination that may disproportionately affect candidates from disadvantaged backgrounds, and explore alternative assessment methods or accommodations to ensure equitable opportunity. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the university entrance exam, as a gatekeeper to higher education, must uphold rigorous standards of fairness, validity, and reliability. Any deviation from established assessment principles can lead to accusations of bias, inequity, and ultimately undermine the credibility of the institution and the exam itself. The pressure to demonstrate the exam's effectiveness while adhering to strict regulatory frameworks requires careful judgment. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that considers both intended and unintended consequences of the exam's design and implementation on diverse candidate groups. This approach is correct because it aligns with the fundamental principles of fair assessment, which are often enshrined in educational regulations and ethical guidelines. Specifically, it addresses the need to identify and mitigate potential adverse impacts on protected groups, ensuring that the exam does not inadvertently create barriers to entry for qualified individuals. This proactive identification and mitigation of bias is a cornerstone of ethical assessment practice and regulatory compliance, aiming to ensure equal opportunity. An approach that focuses solely on the statistical correlation between exam scores and subsequent academic performance, without considering differential impacts across demographic groups, is incorrect. This failure neglects the regulatory requirement to ensure fairness and equity, potentially overlooking systemic disadvantages that might be reflected in the data. It also represents an ethical lapse by prioritizing a narrow definition of predictive validity over the broader principle of equitable access. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss concerns about differential performance as simply reflecting inherent differences in candidate ability, without further investigation. This is ethically problematic as it can perpetuate existing societal inequalities and fails to meet the regulatory obligation to investigate and address potential biases within the assessment itself. It assumes the exam is a neutral measure, which is often not the case when diverse backgrounds and experiences are considered. Finally, an approach that prioritizes speed and cost efficiency in the assessment process over thorough impact analysis is also incorrect. While resource management is important, it cannot supersede the fundamental ethical and regulatory obligations to ensure a fair and valid examination. Sacrificing due diligence in impact assessment for expediency can lead to significant legal and reputational damage, and most importantly, can deny deserving candidates access to education. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic, multifaceted approach. This includes 1. Clearly defining the assessment's objectives and intended outcomes. 2. Identifying all relevant regulatory and ethical standards. 3. Proactively planning for impact assessment, considering potential differential effects on various candidate groups. 4. Gathering and analyzing data from multiple perspectives, including qualitative feedback. 5. Developing and implementing mitigation strategies for identified adverse impacts. And 6. Establishing a continuous monitoring and review process to ensure ongoing fairness and validity. Question 7. The evaluation methodology shows a potential for bias against applicants from non-traditional educational backgrounds. Which approach best addresses this concern to ensure fairness and academic integrity for the Allende University Center entrance exam? Option A. Prioritize the efficiency of the evaluation process, assuming that a streamlined methodology will inherently be fair to all applicants, regardless of their background. Option B. Rely on historical data from previous exams, assuming that past success with a similar methodology guarantees its continued fairness and validity for the current applicant pool. Option C. Conduct a thorough impact assessment to identify specific areas of potential bias and develop targeted mitigation strategies, ensuring the methodology accurately reflects diverse applicant strengths and aligns with the university's academic standards. Option D. Focus exclusively on the theoretical knowledge assessed by the methodology, disregarding any potential practical or contextual disadvantages faced by applicants from different educational systems. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough impact assessment to identify specific areas of potential bias and develop targeted mitigation strategies, ensuring the methodology accurately reflects diverse applicant strengths and aligns with the university's academic standards. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the university entrance exam, as a critical gateway, must uphold principles of fairness, transparency, and academic integrity. Any deviation from established evaluation methodologies can lead to accusations of bias, unfairness, or even procedural impropriety, potentially undermining the credibility of the entire admissions process. The need for a robust impact assessment arises from the responsibility to ensure that the chosen methodology does not inadvertently disadvantage certain groups of applicants or misrepresent their true academic potential. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that considers the potential effects of the evaluation methodology on diverse applicant groups, focusing on fairness and validity. This aligns with the overarching ethical duty of educational institutions to provide equitable opportunities and to select candidates based on merit and suitability for higher education. Specifically, it adheres to the implied regulatory framework of academic admissions, which prioritizes objective and non-discriminatory assessment. The goal is to identify and mitigate any unintended negative consequences before the methodology is implemented, ensuring it accurately reflects the intended learning outcomes and selection criteria. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the perceived efficiency of the evaluation methodology fails to acknowledge the ethical imperative of fairness. It prioritizes speed or ease of administration over the potential for disparate impact on applicants, which is a direct violation of the principles of equitable access to education. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or past practices without rigorous validation overlooks the need for continuous improvement and adaptation. Educational standards and applicant profiles evolve, and relying on outdated or unverified methods can lead to inaccurate assessments and unfair outcomes. Third incorrect approach that neglects to consider the validity of the assessment in predicting academic success in the university's programs ignores the fundamental purpose of an entrance exam. The methodology must not only be fair, but also demonstrably effective in identifying students who are likely to thrive at Allende University Center. Professionals tasked with designing and implementing university entrance exams should adopt a systematic decision-making process. This involves first clearly defining the objectives of the evaluation. Subsequently, potential methodologies should be identified and critically examined for their fairness, validity, and reliability. A thorough impact assessment, considering all relevant applicant demographics and potential biases, is crucial. This assessment should inform the selection of the most appropriate methodology, with a clear plan for monitoring and review to ensure ongoing effectiveness and adherence to ethical and regulatory standards. Question 8. The evaluation methodology shows that to assess the potential impact of a proposed new interdisciplinary degree program at Allende University Center, the admissions committee is considering several approaches. Which approach best aligns with a comprehensive and responsible impact assessment for an educational initiative? Option A. An in-depth examination of the program's potential effects on student academic development. The allocation of university resources, the student experience, and the broader academic community, including the identification of potential risks and mitigation strategies. Option B. A broad survey of prospective students to gauge general interest, followed by an estimation of the required faculty and facility resources based on preliminary enrollment projections. Option C. A detailed analysis of projected enrollment numbers and the potential increase in tuition revenue, alongside an assessment of the program's alignment with current market labor demands. Option D. A review of existing literature on similar interdisciplinary programs at other institutions, focusing on their success rates and student feedback, supplemented by consultations with faculty members who have expressed interest in teaching in the new program. The correct answer is C. A detailed analysis of projected enrollment numbers and the potential increase in tuition revenue, alongside an assessment of the program's alignment with current market labor demands. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge in balancing the need for comprehensive impact assessment with the practical constraints of time and resources inherent in a university entrance exam. The core professional challenge lies in identifying the most effective and ethically sound methodology for evaluating the potential consequences of a proposed new academic program, ensuring that the assessment is both thorough and actionable within the exam's context. This requires a nuanced understanding of impact assessment principles and their application to educational policy. The correct approach involves a systematic and multifaceted evaluation that considers both direct and indirect impacts, stakeholder perspectives, and potential mitigation strategies. This aligns with best practices in impact assessment, which emphasize a holistic view of consequences. Specifically, for a university entrance exam context, this approach would involve identifying the intended beneficiaries, students, the institution, and potentially the wider community, and then analyzing how the new program might affect their academic opportunities, resource allocation, and overall educational experience. Regulatory frameworks for educational institutions, even at the entrance exam level, often implicitly or explicitly require due diligence in program development, which includes assessing potential impacts to ensure program quality and student welfare. Ethical considerations also demand a thorough and unbiased assessment to prevent unintended negative consequences. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate financial implications fails to capture the broader educational and social impacts, neglecting the primary mission of a university. This would be ethically unsound, as it prioritizes financial gain over student development and institutional integrity. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal opinions lacks the rigor and objectivity required for a credible impact assessment. This approach is vulnerable to bias and fails to meet the standards of evidence-based decision-making, which is a cornerstone of responsible academic governance. A third incorrect approach that ignores potential negative consequences or risks is irresponsible and potentially harmful. Ethical obligations and sound governance demand a proactive identification and consideration of all potential outcomes, both positive and negative, to inform decision-making and ensure responsible program implementation. Professionals tasked with such evaluations should employ a structured decision-making process. This involves clearly defining the scope and objectives of the assessment, identifying relevant stakeholders, selecting appropriate methodologies for data collection and analysis, considering a wide range of potential impacts, economic, social, educational, environmental, and documenting findings transparently. The process should prioritize objectivity, thoroughness, and ethical considerations, ensuring that the assessment serves as a reliable basis for informed decision-making regarding the proposed program. Question 9. Investigation of how an applicant should address a single, lower-than-average grade in a core subject on their Allende University Center entrance exam application, given the university's emphasis on academic honesty and a comprehensive review of past performance. Option A. Omit the lower grade from the application, focusing solely on other higher grades and achievements to present a stronger overall academic profile. Option B. Directly acknowledge the lower grade in a brief, factual addendum to the application, explaining the extenuating circumstances without making excuses and reiterating commitment to academic excellence. Option C. Exaggerate the importance of extracurricular achievements and volunteer work to distract from the lower grade, without explicitly mentioning it. Option D. Create a plausible but untrue narrative to explain the lower grade, emphasizing external factors beyond the applicant's control. The correct answer is B. Directly acknowledge the lower grade in a brief, factual addendum to the application, explaining the extenuating circumstances without making excuses, and reiterating commitment to academic excellence. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge for an aspiring student at Allende University Center, requiring them to navigate the ethical implications of academic integrity and the potential for misrepresentation. The core professional challenge lies in balancing the desire to present oneself favorably with the absolute requirement of honesty and adherence to academic regulations. Careful judgment is required to avoid actions that could be construed as dishonest or misleading, which could have severe consequences for their admission. The correct approach involves a direct and transparent communication of their academic situation, acknowledging the circumstances that led to the lower grade, and providing context without making excuses. This aligns with the ethical principles of honesty and integrity, which are paramount in academic admissions. Specifically, it adheres to the implicit understanding within the Allende University Center's admission guidelines that all submitted information must be truthful and accurate. By proactively addressing the lower grade, the applicant demonstrates maturity and a commitment to ethical conduct, which are valued qualities in university candidates. An incorrect approach would be to omit the lower grade entirely. This constitutes a direct violation of academic honesty and misrepresentation of their academic record, which is a fundamental ethical and regulatory failure. Admissions committees rely on complete and accurate information to make informed decisions, and withholding relevant data undermines this process. Another incorrect approach would be to inflate the significance of other achievements to overshadow the lower grade without acknowledging it. Highlighting strengths is important. This strategy, when used to deliberately obscure a negative aspect of the academic record, borders on deception. It fails to meet the ethical standard of full disclosure and can be seen as an attempt to mislead the admissions committee. A third incorrect approach would be to fabricate an explanation for the lower grade that is not entirely truthful. This is a clear breach of academic integrity and ethical conduct. Universities expect applicants to be accountable for their academic performance, and dishonesty in explaining it is a severe red flag that would likely lead to immediate rejection and potential blacklisting from future admissions. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a commitment to transparency and honesty. Applicants should always err on the side of full disclosure. When faced with a potentially negative aspect of their application, they should consider how to present it truthfully and constructively, focusing on lessons learned and future commitment to academic success. This involves understanding the university's values and ensuring their application reflects those values. Question 10. The evaluation methodology shows a proposed shift in how Allende University Center assesses its entrance exam candidates, moving from a traditional single-score focus to a more nuanced approach. Which of the following methodologies best reflects a commitment to comprehensive and equitable candidate assessment, aligning with the principles of a robust university entrance examination? Option A methodology that allows admissions officers to select candidates based on their personal impressions and perceived fit with the university culture, without a standardized evaluation framework. Option B, a methodology that relies exclusively on a newly developed, high-stakes aptitude test designed to predict immediate academic success, with no other factors considered. Option C, a methodology that prioritizes candidates based on the speed at which their applications are processed, with a focus on administrative efficiency. Option D, a methodology that combines academic transcripts, standardized test results, a portfolio of creative work, and a structured interview, with all components weighted according to pre-established, transparent criteria. The correct answer is D, a methodology that combines academic transcripts, standardized test results, a portfolio of creative work, and a structured interview, with all components weighted according to pre-established, transparent criteria. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a candidate to critically assess the effectiveness and ethical implications of different impact assessment methodologies within the specific context of the Allende University Center entrance exam's regulatory framework. The challenge lies in discerning which approach best aligns with the exam's stated objectives of fairness, transparency, and academic integrity, while also considering the practicalities of implementation and potential biases. Careful judgment is required to move beyond superficial understanding and identify the nuanced strengths and weaknesses of each method. The correct approach is to prioritize a methodology that emphasizes a comprehensive, multifaceted evaluation, incorporating both quantitative and qualitative data, and allowing for diverse perspectives. This approach is justified by the Allende University Center's commitment to a holistic assessment, as implied by the need for a robust entrance exam. Such a methodology would likely involve a review of academic records, standardized test scores, if applicable, extracurricular achievements, and potentially personal statements or interviews, all assessed against clearly defined criteria. This aligns with the ethical imperative of providing all candidates with a fair opportunity to demonstrate their suitability for the university, minimizing the risk of arbitrary or discriminatory selection. The regulatory framework for university entrance exams, even if not explicitly detailed here, generally mandates fairness and transparency, which this comprehensive approach upholds. An approach that relies solely on a single, narrow metric, such as a specific test score, is incorrect because it fails to capture the full spectrum of a candidate's potential and may inadvertently disadvantage individuals with different learning styles or backgrounds. This could lead to regulatory noncompliance if the exam's framework implicitly or explicitly requires a broader assessment, An approach that prioritizes speed and administrative ease over thoroughness is also incorrect. While efficiency is desirable, it should not come at the expense of fairness and accuracy. This could violate ethical principles of due diligence and potentially lead to the exclusion of deserving candidates, undermining the integrity of the entrance process. An approach that introduces subjective biases without clear, predefined rubrics for evaluation is ethically problematic and could lead to regulatory challenges. Without objective criteria, personal preferences or unconscious biases can unduly influence admissions decisions, violating principles of equal opportunity. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves first understanding the overarching goals and regulatory constraints of the assessment, then critically evaluating each proposed methodology against these goals and constraints, considering its potential impact on fairness, validity, reliability, and ethical considerations. Professionals should seek to identify methods that are transparent, defensible, and promote the selection of qualified candidates while minimizing bias and ensuring equitable treatment. Question 11. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a critical piece of information for evaluating an applicant's eligibility for a specialized program at Allende University Center is missing from their submitted application file. This missing information is crucial for determining if the applicant meets the program's prerequisite knowledge. What is the most appropriate and compliant course of action for the admissions officer to take? Option A. Make an educated guess about the applicant's qualifications based on other parts of their application and proceed with the evaluation, noting the assumption made. Option B. Initiate a formal request through the university's approved communication channels to the applicant, clearly stating the specific missing information and the deadline for submission, while also cross-referencing internal databases for any related documentation that might have been submitted through alternative means. Option C. Forward the incomplete application to the program director, highlighting the missing information and suggesting they reach out to the applicant directly. Option D. Contact the applicant directly via their personal social media profiles to inquire about the missing information, explaining the urgency of the situation. The correct answer is B. Initiate a formal request through the university's approved communication channels to the applicant, clearly stating the specific missing information and the deadline for submission, while also cross-referencing internal databases for any related documentation that might have been submitted through alternative means. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect sensitive data. The Allende University Center entrance exam framework emphasizes the importance of data privacy and integrity, particularly when dealing with applicant information. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any information gathering is conducted in a manner that is both effective and compliant with established protocols. The correct approach involves a systematic and authorized review of existing documentation and systems. This method is aligned with the Allende University Center's commitment to data security and privacy regulations. By utilizing established channels and seeking appropriate permissions, the individual demonstrates adherence to the principles of lawful data access and responsible information management. This approach minimizes the risk of unauthorized disclosure or misuse of applicant data, thereby upholding the integrity of the admissions process and the trust placed in the university. An incorrect approach that involves directly contacting applicants for information that should already be available through official channels is professionally unacceptable. This action bypasses established procedures and could be perceived as an attempt to circumvent data protection measures. It also places an undue burden on applicants and risks creating inconsistencies in the applicant record. Furthermore, it could violate the privacy expectations of applicants, as their personal information is being sought through informal and potentially insecure means. Another incorrect approach, which is to infer or assume information based on incomplete data, is also professionally unsound. This method relies on speculation rather than verifiable facts, leading to potential inaccuracies in applicant assessments. Such assumptions can result in unfair evaluations and may contravene the principles of objective and equitable admissions processes. The regulatory framework for university admissions stresses the importance of evidence-based decision-making, which is undermined by inferential reasoning. A third incorrect approach, which is to share incomplete or unverified information with other departments, is a serious breach of professional conduct and data governance. This action risks the dissemination of inaccurate or misleading information, which can have significant consequences for both the applicants and the university. It also violates the principle of data confidentiality, as sensitive applicant details are being shared without proper authorization or verification, potentially leading to reputational damage and regulatory penalties. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the relevant university policies, data protection laws, and ethical guidelines. When faced with a need for information, the first step should always be to consult existing, authorized sources. If the required information is not readily available, the next step is to identify the appropriate internal channels for requesting it, ensuring that all requests are documented and approved. This systematic approach ensures that information is gathered ethically, legally, and efficiently, safeguarding both individual privacy and institutional integrity. Question 12. When evaluating applications for the Allende University Center entrance exam, which approach best upholds the integrity and fairness of the admissions process according to the exam's regulatory framework? Option A. Adjusting an applicant's score based on perceived socioeconomic background, assuming that some candidates may have had fewer opportunities to prepare for the exam. Option B. Systematically assessing each applicant's academic achievements, standardized test scores, essays, and recommendations against the defined admission criteria, ensuring a consistent and objective evaluation for all. Option C. Relying on informal conversations with current students and faculty to gauge an applicant's fit for the university, even if this information is not formally documented. Option D. Giving preferential consideration to applicants whose families have a history of donating to the university, based on the belief that they will be more engaged alumni. Correct answer is B. Systematically assessing each applicant's academic achievements, standardized test scores, essays, and recommendations against the defined admission criteria, ensuring a consistent and objective evaluation for all. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the ethical and regulatory landscape of university admissions while facing potential external pressures or personal biases. The core of the challenge lies in maintaining objectivity and fairness in the evaluation process, ensuring that all candidates are assessed against the same rigorous standards, irrespective of any personal connections or perceived advantages. Careful judgment is required to uphold the integrity of the Allende University Center entrance exam and its commitment to merit-based admissions. The correct approach involves a systematic and impartial assessment of all applicants' qualifications against the established criteria for the Allende University Center entrance exam. This means focusing solely on the information provided in the application, such as academic records, standardized test scores, essays, and letters of recommendation, and evaluating these against the defined rubric for admission. This approach is ethically sound and aligns with the regulatory framework of the exam, which mandates fair and equitable treatment of all candidates. It upholds the principle of meritocracy, ensuring that admission decisions are based on a candidate's demonstrated ability and potential to succeed at the university. An incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal assumptions about a candidate's background or potential, without substantiation from their application materials, fails to adhere to the objective evaluation standards. This introduces bias and undermines the fairness of the admissions process, potentially violating the spirit and letter of the exam's regulatory framework, which prioritizes objective assessment. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes a candidate based on perceived external factors, such as family connections or anticipated future contributions, rather than their current qualifications, is also ethically problematic. This deviates from the merit-based selection process and can lead to unfair advantages for some applicants while disadvantaging others who are equally or more qualified. Such an approach risks compromising the university's reputation and the integrity of its admissions. Finally, an approach that involves seeking external opinions or endorsements that are not part of the official application process, and then allowing these to unduly influence the decision, introduces an element of subjectivity and potential favoritism. This bypasses the established evaluation protocols and can lead to decisions that are not grounded in the candidate's actual merit as assessed through the prescribed channels. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the exam's regulatory framework and ethical guidelines. Professionals must prioritize objectivity, fairness, and evidence-based assessment. When faced with ambiguity or potential bias, it is crucial to refer back to the established criteria and, if necessary, seek guidance from supervisors or review committees to ensure adherence to best practices and regulatory compliance. The focus should always be on the candidate's qualifications, as presented through the official application channels. Question 13. The evaluation methodology shows that, for new program proposals submitted for the Allende University Center entrance exam, a critical step is to assess their potential impact. Considering the exam's regulatory framework, which of the following approaches best aligns with the mandated impact assessment process for a proposed interdisciplinary studies program? Option A. A comprehensive review of the program's alignment with the university's mission, its potential impact on existing academic offerings, and the availability of resources, all within the explicit guidelines of the Allende University Center entrance exam's regulatory framework. Option B. A qualitative assessment based on feedback from a small group of faculty members who express enthusiasm for the program's interdisciplinary nature. Option C. An assessment that primarily focuses on the program's innovative and unique subject matter, highlighting its potential to attract a new demographic of students to the university. Option D. An evaluation that prioritizes projected student enrollment figures and potential tuition revenue, as these are key indicators of program success and financial sustainability. The correct answer is A. A comprehensive review of the program's alignment with the university's mission, its potential impact on existing academic offerings, and the availability of resources, all within the explicit guidelines of the Allende University Center entrance exam's regulatory framework. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the Allende University Center entrance exam's regulatory framework mandates a specific, structured approach to impact assessment. The challenge lies in correctly identifying and applying the principles of this framework to a new program proposal, ensuring compliance and ethical considerations are met. Misinterpreting or deviating from the established methodology can lead to flawed assessments, potentially resulting in the approval of programs that are not aligned with the university's strategic goals or that fail to meet essential quality standards, thereby undermining the integrity of the entrance examination process. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the proposed program's alignment with the university's mission, its potential impact on existing academic offerings, and the availability of resources, all within the explicit guidelines of the Allende University Center entrance exam's regulatory framework. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core requirements of the exam's impact assessment protocol, which prioritizes strategic fit, resource feasibility, and academic integrity. Adhering to these established criteria ensures that any new program is evaluated objectively and systematically, as stipulated by the exam's governing regulations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the novelty of the program without considering its resource implications or strategic alignment fails to adhere to the Allende University Center entrance exam's regulatory framework. This approach is ethically and regulatorily unsound because it bypasses crucial assessment criteria mandated by the exam, potentially leading to an incomplete or biased evaluation. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes potential student enrollment numbers above all else, neglecting the program's academic rigor and its impact on faculty workload, also violates the exam's established methodology. This is a failure because the framework requires a balanced assessment, not one skewed by a single, potentially superficial metric. Finally, an approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal opinions rather than objective data and established assessment criteria is fundamentally flawed. This disregards the exam's requirement for a rigorous, evidence-based impact assessment, leading to an unreliable and non-compliant evaluation. Professionals tasked with impact assessments under the Allende University Center entrance exam framework should employ a decision-making process that begins with a thorough understanding of the exam's specific regulatory guidelines. This involves identifying all mandated assessment criteria, understanding the weight given to each, and ensuring that the evaluation methodology is applied consistently. When faced with a new proposal, the professional should systematically gather relevant data, analyze it against each criterion, and document the findings transparently. This structured, data-driven and regulation-compliant approach ensures that the assessment is both accurate and defensible, upholding the integrity of the university's entrance examination process. Question 14. Analysis of the ethical considerations and regulatory compliance required when preparing for and undertaking the Allende University Center entrance exam, specifically concerning the integrity of the assessment process and the truthful representation of one's capabilities. Option A. Utilizing online forums and study groups to share answers and strategies during the actual entrance exam to maximize the chances of a high score. Option B. Seeking advanced copies of the entrance exam questions from unofficial sources to gain an unfair advantage. Option C. Relying solely on personal knowledge and preparation, ensuring all submitted materials are original and accurately reflect one's abilities, in strict adherence to the Allende University Center's academic integrity policies. Option D. Submitting a portfolio that includes projects completed by others, claiming them as personal achievement to demonstrate a broader range of skills. The correct answer is C. Relying solely on personal knowledge and preparation, ensuring all submitted materials are original and accurately reflect one's abilities, in strict adherence to the Allende University Center's academic integrity policies. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge for an aspiring student at Allende University Center regarding the ethical implications of academic integrity and the responsible use of information. The core difficulty lies in balancing the desire to perform well on an entrance exam with the obligation to adhere to the university's academic honesty policies. Misrepresenting one's qualifications or engaging in deceptive practices, even if perceived as a shortcut to success, undermines the fundamental principles of fair assessment and the value of genuine learning. The correct approach involves a commitment to honesty and transparency in all aspects of the application process, including the entrance examination. This aligns with the foundational ethical principles of academic integrity, which are paramount in any educational institution. Specifically, it upholds the Allende University Center's regulatory framework, which implicitly or explicitly mandates truthful representation of one's abilities and prohibits any form of academic misconduct. By relying solely on one's own knowledge and preparation, the student demonstrates respect for the examination process and the institution's standards. An incorrect approach would be to seek or use unauthorized assistance during the exam. This directly violates academic integrity policies and constitutes a form of cheating. Such an action not only jeopardizes the student's admission, but also reflects a disregard for the ethical standards expected of all members of the university community. Another incorrect approach would be to misrepresent prior academic achievements or experiences on the application to inflate one's qualifications. This is a form of dishonesty that erodes trust and undermines the fairness of the selection process. A third incorrect approach would be to plagiarize or present work that is not entirely one's own in any preparatory materials or essays submitted as part of the application. This is a direct breach of academic honesty and demonstrates a lack of original thought and effort. The professional decision-making process for similar situations requires a clear understanding of the institution's academic integrity policies and a strong personal ethical compass. Before undertaking any action related to an academic assessment or application, a student should ask, does this action align with the principles of honesty, fairness, and respect for the institution's rules? If there is any doubt, seeking clarification from the university admissions office or reviewing the official academic integrity guidelines is essential. Prioritizing ethical conduct over perceived short-term gains is crucial for building a foundation of integrity that will serve the student throughout their academic and professional career. Question 15. The audit findings indicate significant procedural gaps in the admissions process for the Allende University Center entrance exam, potentially impacting the fairness and integrity of candidate selection. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation? Option A. Conduct a thorough impact assessment to understand the scope of the procedural gaps, identify affected parties, and develop a strategic communication and remediation plan aligned with university policies and regulatory expectations. Option B. Conceal the audit findings from all external stakeholders and focus solely on implementing internal corrective measures to avoid any public scrutiny or negative perception. Option C. Undertake a superficial review of the audit report and issue a generic statement acknowledging that operational improvements are being considered, without detailing the specific findings or remediation steps. Option D. Immediately issue a public statement downplaying the significance of the findings to mitigate potential reputational damage, while internally addressing the issues without public disclosure. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough impact assessment to understand the scope of the procedural gaps, identify affected parties, and develop a strategic communication and remediation plan aligned with university policies and regulatory expectations. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for transparency and accountability with the potential for reputational damage and the need to protect sensitive institutional information. The university must decide how to communicate findings that could be perceived negatively by stakeholders, including prospective students, current students, faculty, and the wider community. A hasty or misleading communication strategy could exacerbate the situation, while a delayed or overly defensive one could breed distrust. Careful judgment is required to ensure the communication is accurate, timely, and constructive. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that considers all relevant stakeholders, potential consequences, and the university's strategic objectives. This approach prioritizes understanding the full scope of the audit findings and their implications before formulating a communication plan. It allows for a proactive and informed response, ensuring that any communication is aligned with the university's values and regulatory obligations. This aligns with the principles of good governance and ethical conduct expected of educational institutions, which often have implicit or explicit duties to be transparent with their stakeholders and to act in a manner that upholds public trust. The Allende University Center entrance exam regulations likely emphasize a commitment to integrity and responsible management, which this approach directly supports. An approach that focuses solely on immediate damage control without a thorough understanding of the findings risks misrepresenting the situation or overlooking critical issues. This could lead to a failure to address the root causes of the audit findings, potentially resulting in recurring problems and further reputational harm. It also risks violating principles of transparency and honesty, which are fundamental to academic integrity and public trust. An approach that prioritizes secrecy and withholding information, even if intended to protect the university's image, is ethically problematic and likely contravenes regulatory expectations for responsible institutional management. Such an approach can foster suspicion and erode trust among stakeholders, ultimately proving more damaging in the long run. It fails to acknowledge the legitimate interests stakeholders have in understanding the operational health and integrity of the university. An approach that involves a superficial review of the findings and a generic public statement, without tailoring the response to the specific issues identified, would be insufficient. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to engage meaningfully with the audit outcomes. It suggests a reactive rather than a proactive stance, which is unlikely to satisfy regulatory scrutiny or rebuild stakeholder confidence. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Understand the full scope and implications of the audit findings. 2. Identify all affected stakeholders and their potential concerns. 3. Assess the potential risks and benefits of various communication strategies. 4. Consult with relevant internal and external experts, e.g., legal counsel, communication specialists. 5. Develop a clear, accurate, and timely communication plan that addresses the findings constructively. 6. Implement the plan and monitor its effectiveness, being prepared to adapt as necessary. 7. Ensure all actions are consistent with regulatory requirements and ethical principles. Question 16. Process analysis reveals that a promising candidate for the Allende University Center entrance exam has submitted a compelling personal statement detailing significant family health emergencies that occurred immediately prior to and during the examination period, potentially impacting their focus and performance. The candidate requests a review of their application based on these extenuating circumstances. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action according to the Allende University Center's regulatory framework for entrance examinations? Option A. Immediately adjust the candidate's examination score upwards to account for the perceived impact of their personal difficulties, without a formal assessment or documented justification. Option B. Initiate a formal review process to assess the documented impact of the family emergencies on the candidate's examination performance, consulting relevant university policies for handling exceptional circumstances, and making a decision based on established criteria. Option C. Dismiss the candidate's request for review, emphasizing that the entrance examination results are final and that personal circumstances cannot alter the outcome. Option D. Grant the candidate an automatic re-examination or special consideration based solely on their personal statement, without further investigation or adherence to established review protocols. The correct answer is B. Initiate a formal review process to assess the documented impact of the family emergencies on the candidate's examination performance, consulting relevant university policies for handling exceptional circumstances, and making a decision based on established criteria. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the need to support students facing personal difficulties. The core tension lies in upholding the established entrance examination standards while acknowledging that external factors can significantly impact a candidate's performance. Careful judgment is required to ensure fairness and adherence to the Allende University Center's regulatory framework for admissions. Correct approach involves a thorough, documented review of the candidate's situation and its potential impact on their exam performance, followed by a decision based on established university policy and the specific criteria outlined in the Allende University Center entrance exam guidelines. This approach is correct because it prioritizes a systematic and evidence-based assessment, ensuring that any deviation from standard procedure is justified and transparent. The Allende University Center entrance exam guidelines likely stipulate procedures for handling exceptional circumstances, emphasizing fairness and due process. This approach aligns with the ethical principle of treating candidates equitably and making decisions based on objective criteria, rather than subjective impressions or undue pressure. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the candidate's stated personal difficulties without independent verification or a structured review process fails to uphold the integrity of the entrance examination. This could lead to accusations of favoritism or a lowering of academic standards, violating the principle of merit-based admissions. Another incorrect approach that involves immediately granting the candidate a special exemption without a proper assessment of the impact on their exam performance or consideration of how this might set a precedent for future applicants is also professionally unacceptable. This bypasses the established regulatory framework and could undermine the fairness and credibility of the admissions process. A further incorrect approach that involves dismissing the candidates concerns outright without any form of review or consideration of the university's policies on exceptional circumstances demonstrates a lack of empathy and a failure to adhere to the spirit of fairness embedded within the Allende University Center's operational guidelines. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding and applying the relevant university policies and entrance exam regulations. 2. Gathering all necessary information and evidence related to the candidate's situation. 3. Conducting a fair and impartial assessment of the impact of the circumstances on the candidate's performance. 4. Documenting the entire process and the rationale for the final decision. 5. Ensuring transparency and consistency in decision-making. Question 17. Research into the potential impact of a significant sponsorship offer from a technology company on the upcoming Allende University Center entrance examination has revealed that the company's primary interest lies in gaining early access to a pool of potential future employees. This sponsorship would provide substantial financial resources for exam administration and infrastructure upgrades. However, concerns have been raised about whether the company's involvement could inadvertently influence the examination's content, administration, or the perception of fairness among applicants. What is the most appropriate approach for Allende University Center to take in evaluating this sponsorship offer? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive and objective impact assessment, meticulously evaluating the potential consequences of the sponsorship on the fairness, impartiality, and academic integrity of the entrance examination, and develop mitigation strategies if necessary. Option B. Reject the sponsorship outright due to any potential for conflict of interest, without fully exploring the possibility of structuring the agreement to safeguard the examination's integrity. Option C. Engage in a superficial review of the sponsorship agreement, focusing primarily on the financial benefits to the university and proceed with the sponsorship with minimal consideration for potential ethical implications. Option D. Accept the sponsorship immediately to secure the much-needed financial resources, assuming that the company's intentions are purely philanthropic and will not affect the examination process. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive and objective impact assessment, meticulously evaluating the potential consequences of the sponsorship on the fairness, impartiality, and academic integrity of the entrance examination, and develop mitigation strategies if necessary. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's immediate need for funding and the ethical obligation to ensure the integrity of the entrance examination process. The decision-maker must balance institutional priorities with the principles of fairness, transparency, and academic rigor. A hasty or compromised decision could lead to reputational damage for Allende University Center, erode public trust, and potentially violate established academic regulations. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective impact assessment that prioritizes the integrity of the examination process. This means meticulously evaluating the potential consequences of the proposed sponsorship on the fairness of the exam, the perception of impartiality among applicants, and the overall academic standards of the university. This approach aligns with the core ethical principles of academic institutions, which mandate the safeguarding of examination processes from undue influence or bias. Specifically, it adheres to the implicit regulatory framework governing university admission, which demands that all applicants be assessed on merit and that the examination process be free from any form of compromise. This upholds the principle of equal opportunity and ensures that the university admits students based on their genuine academic capabilities. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate financial gain without a comprehensive impact assessment fails to uphold these fundamental ethical and regulatory obligations. Such an approach risks introducing bias, creating an uneven playing field for applicants, and undermining the credibility of the university's admissions. This directly contravenes the spirit and letter of academic regulations that aim to ensure fair and equitable assessment. Another incorrect approach that involves accepting the sponsorship with minimal or superficial review, assuming no negative impact, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to proactively identify and mitigate potential risks. It neglects the responsibility to scrutinize any external influence that could compromise the integrity of a critical academic process. A further incorrect approach that seeks to justify the sponsorship by focusing solely on the potential benefits to the university, such as improved facilities or resources, without adequately addressing the potential negative impacts on the examination's fairness, is ethically flawed. This demonstrates a prioritization of institutional gain over the fundamental principles of academic integrity and fairness to prospective students. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This includes identifying potential conflicts of interest, evaluating the severity and likelihood of negative impacts, consulting relevant university policies and ethical guidelines, and seeking input from stakeholders such as academic committees and legal counsel. The ultimate decision should be guided by a commitment to upholding the highest standards of academic integrity and fairness. Question 18. The performance metrics show a consistent underrepresentation of students from certain socioeconomic backgrounds within the admitted cohort at Allende University Center over the past 3 admission cycles. The admissions committee is tasked with addressing this trend while upholding the integrity and fairness of the entrance examination process. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Disregard the performance metrics as they do not directly indicate any flaws in the entrance examination itself and continue with the current admission selection process. Option B. Immediately adjust the scoring thresholds for the entrance examination for applicants from identified socioeconomic backgrounds to meet a predetermined diversity target. Option C. Implement a strict quota system, reserving a fixed percentage of available places for applicants from the underrepresented socioeconomic groups, regardless of their performance on the entrance examination. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of the admissions process to identify potential systemic barriers that may be inadvertently disadvantaging applicants from these backgrounds, and develop targeted support programs or outreach initiatives to address identified issues, ensuring all admissions decisions remain based on the established criteria. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough review of the admissions process to identify potential systemic barriers that may be inadvertently disadvantaging applicants from these backgrounds, and develop targeted support programs or outreach initiatives to address identified issues, ensuring all admissions decisions remain based on the established criteria. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because the admissions committee at Allende University Center must balance the stated goals of increasing diversity with the imperative to maintain academic rigor and fairness in the selection process. The performance metrics, while indicating a potential shortfall in diversity, do not inherently provide a direct causal link to specific admissions policies or suggest a universally applicable solution. The committee must exercise careful judgment to avoid implementing measures that could be perceived as discriminatory or that undermine the integrity of the entrance examination process, as governed by the Allende University Center's established admissions framework and ethical guidelines. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the admissions process to identify potential systemic barriers to diversity, followed by the development of targeted, evidence-based strategies that align with the university's mission and regulatory compliance. This approach is professionally sound because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the underlying issues before proposing interventions. It adheres to the principles of fairness and equity by seeking to address disadvantages without resorting to arbitrary quotas or preferential treatment that could violate the spirit of merit-based admissions. Such a strategy would also be mindful of the Allende University Center's commitment to a holistic review, ensuring that all aspects of an applicant's profile are considered within the established framework. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on adjusting admissions thresholds for underrepresented groups without a deeper analysis risks creating a perception of lowered standards and could lead to legal or ethical challenges. This would fail to address the root causes of any diversity shortfall and could be seen as a form of reverse discrimination, violating the principle of equal opportunity. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing a fixed quota for specific demographic groups, irrespective of applicant qualifications, directly contravenes the Allende University Center's commitment to a merit-based selection process and could be seen as a violation of fairness and equal treatment principles. This approach is not supported by the university's regulatory framework, which emphasizes objective assessment. A third incorrect approach that involves ignoring the performance metrics and continuing with the status quo fails to acknowledge the university's stated commitment to diversity and misses an opportunity for constructive improvement. This passive stance does not demonstrate proactive engagement with institutional goals and could lead to stagnation. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, clearly define the problem and its potential causes using available data. Second, consult the relevant regulatory framework and ethical guidelines of the institution. Third, brainstorm a range of potential solutions, evaluating each against established criteria for fairness, effectiveness, and compliance. Fourth, select the most appropriate solution based on this rigorous evaluation. And finally, implement and monitor the chosen solution, being prepared to adapt as necessary. Question 19. Comparative studies suggest that university admissions processes can be enhanced by considering a wide range of applicant attributes. In the context of the Allende University Center entrance exam, which of the following approaches best balances the pursuit of a diverse student body with the regulatory requirements for fair and objective evaluation? Option A. Signing a predetermined number of admission slots specifically for candidates from underrepresented backgrounds, regardless of their performance on the core components of the Allende University Center entrance exam. Option B. Focusing exclusively on the highest scores achieved on the standardized sections of the Allende University Center entrance exam, with no additional consideration given to any other applicant attributes or background factors. Option C. Implementing a holistic review process that evaluates academic achievements, extracurricular involvement, personal essays, and demonstrated leadership potential, while ensuring that the consideration of an applicant's background contributes to a richer learning environment and aligns with the exam's stated objectives for a well-rounded cohort. Option D. Utilizing a subjective assessment of an applicant's potential based on personal interviews, with a primary goal of selecting individuals who are perceived to be most likely to succeed, irrespective of their performance on the exam's objective measures or their contribution to diversity. The correct answer is C. Implementing a holistic review process that evaluates academic achievements, extracurricular involvement, personal essays, and demonstrated leadership potential, while ensuring that the consideration of an applicant's background contributes to a richer learning environment and aligns with the exam's stated objectives for a well-rounded cohort. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's desire to attract a diverse student body and the ethical imperative to ensure that admissions processes are fair, transparent, and free from undue influence or bias. The admissions committee must navigate the complexities of evaluating candidates holistically while adhering to the established regulatory framework of the Allende University Center entrance exam. Careful judgment is required to balance the pursuit of diversity with the principles of meritocracy and equal opportunity as defined by the exam's governing regulations. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of each applicant's qualifications against the established criteria of the Allende University Center entrance exam, with a specific focus on how their background and experiences contribute to the university's stated goals for diversity without compromising academic standards. This approach is justified by the regulatory framework of the exam, which mandates a standardized and equitable evaluation process. The ethical guidelines for university admissions, as implicitly understood within the context of such entrance exams, require that all candidates be judged on their merits and potential, and that any consideration of diversity be integrated in a manner that is transparent and defensible under the exam's regulations. This ensures fairness and prevents the perception of preferential treatment based on factors unrelated to academic suitability. An incorrect approach that prioritizes meeting diversity quotas above all else, without a rigorous assessment of academic merit as defined by the exam, would fail to uphold the integrity of the entrance process. This would be a regulatory failure as it deviates from the standardized evaluation criteria. Ethically, it undermines the principle of equal opportunity and could lead to the admission of less qualified candidates, potentially impacting the academic environment. Another incorrect approach, which dismisses the importance of diversity altogether and focuses solely on a narrow definition of academic excellence, would also be problematic. This could be a regulatory failure if the exam's framework implicitly or explicitly encourages consideration of diverse backgrounds as part of a well-rounded student body. Ethically, it would fail to recognize the value that diverse perspectives bring to a university community, potentially leading to a less enriching educational experience for all. Finally, an approach that relies on subjective interpretations of potential, without clear, measurable criteria, tied to the exam's objectives risks introducing bias and inconsistency, which is a regulatory and ethical failure. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the specific regulatory framework governing the admissions process, including any stated objectives related to diversity. It requires a commitment to objective evaluation, the use of standardized assessment tools, and a transparent process for considering all aspects of an applicant's profile. When diversity is a stated goal, the committee must ensure that its integration into the evaluation is systematic and justifiable within the exam's parameters, rather than an arbitrary or preferential consideration. Question 20. System analysis indicates that a significant potential donor has offered substantial financial support to Allende University Center, contingent upon the implementation of specific modifications to the entrance examination that they have suggested, purportedly to better reflect real-world problem-solving skills. Which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical obligations governing university entrance examinations? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the proposed modifications on the examination's validity, reliability, fairness, and alignment with the university's academic objectives, adhering strictly to the established psychometric principles and regulatory guidelines for university admissions. Option B. Perform a cursory review of the donor's suggestions and implement those that appear superficially beneficial, without a formal assessment of their broader implications. Option C. Make minor, cosmetic changes to the examination based on the donor's input, assuming these will satisfy the donor without significantly altering the assessment's core structure. Option D. Implement the donor's suggested modifications directly, as the financial contribution is crucial for the university's immediate operational needs. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of the proposed modifications on the examination's validity, reliability, fairness, and alignment with the university's academic objectives, adhering strictly to the established psychometric principles and regulatory guidelines for university admissions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's immediate need for funding and the ethical obligation to ensure the integrity of the entrance examination process. The pressure to secure a significant donation from a potentially influential entity can create an environment where shortcuts or compromises in assessment procedures might be considered. This requires careful judgment to balance institutional goals with the fundamental principles of fairness, transparency, and academic rigor. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a thorough and objective impact assessment of the proposed changes on the examination's validity, reliability, and fairness. This assessment must be grounded in established psychometric principles and the regulatory framework governing university admissions in the specified jurisdiction. Specifically, it requires evaluating how the proposed changes might affect the ability of the examination to accurately measure the knowledge and skills relevant to university-level study, and whether these changes could introduce bias or disadvantage certain groups of applicants. The regulatory framework for university entrance exams in this jurisdiction mandates that all assessment instruments must be fair, valid, and reliable, and that any modifications must be rigorously tested to ensure these standards are maintained. Therefore, a systematic impact assessment, adhering to these principles, is the only professionally responsible course of action. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing the proposed changes without a formal impact assessment, based solely on the donor's suggestions, represents a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This approach prioritizes financial gain over academic integrity and fairness, potentially undermining the credibility of the entire admissions process. It violates the principle of objective assessment, as decisions about examination content and structure should be based on educational research and psychometric best practices, not external influence. Accepting the donor's suggestions with only a superficial review, without a systematic evaluation of their psychometric implications, is also professionally unacceptable. This approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to adhere to the regulatory requirement for rigorous validation of assessment instruments. It risks introducing unintended biases or reducing the examination's effectiveness without proper justification or mitigation strategies. Proposing minor adjustments to the examination based on the donor's input without a comprehensive understanding of the potential cascading effects on the overall assessment is another flawed approach. This demonstrates a failure to appreciate the interconnectedness of assessment components and the importance of a holistic evaluation of any proposed changes. It neglects the regulatory imperative to ensure that the entire examination remains a valid and reliable measure of student aptitude. Professional reasoning. Professionals in university admissions and assessment must adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes academic integrity and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying potential conflicts of interest and ethical considerations. 2. Consulting relevant regulatory frameworks and established professional standards. 3. Conducting thorough, evidence-based assessments of any proposed changes. 4. Documenting all decisions and the rationale behind them. 5. Seeking expert advice when necessary. In this scenario, the professional must recognize the potential for external influence to compromise the integrity of the examination, and therefore initiate a formal impact assessment process that adheres strictly to the established regulatory guidelines for university entrance examinations.